Stellaris Dev Diary 222 Moddability updates in LEM. And that's very interesting because they're also looking for modders to work a little bit with the company before the patch will be released. So there's something to it. Let's get to it. So they're changing a lot of things. Variables. The syntax for using the variables was not ideal in many cases. With 3.1, we've greatly increased the power of variables. So 3.1 is the number of the LEM patch. So it's not a big step, but bug fixing is strong. First of all, the format. Previously, when you wanted to get the value of a variable, you had to refer to the variable itself, and that was all. Now you can do a few more things. Variable myVar gets the value of my var variable set on the current scope. Value from capital scope myVar gets the value of the myVar variable set on from's capital. Value trigger num pops gets the number of pops in the current scope. Value from capital scope trigger num pops gets the number of pops in from's capital. So there's a couple of different things you can do with variables. So you can do dot scoping, which saves a lot of ugliness and is a big improvement as it is. As you can see, you can also refer to triggers with trigger. This will support any trigger checking a number and just a number with no of these fancy brackets. The previous ugly format for copying variables across different scopes has been removed. So there is to be changes made. The one where you specify value scope is X, variable is epsilon. 3.1 already had an effect export trigger to variable, but it only worked with fleet power. That was a prototype. The functionality has been expanded to all such triggers. Importantly, that effect lets you get values from triggers that are a bit more complex. With the special brackets, they are still comparing a single number. There's an example here. Export trigger value to variable. Trigger num is number assigned jobs. Parameters is job minor. Variable num minor jobs. So something happens when you have a number of minor jobs assigned, probably. 3.0, also to mention it again, added a bunch more ways to get game values, such as modifier numbers and resource stockpiles to variables. It also added a few more places where you could use them. Multipliers in add resource and add modifier, for instance. With 3.1, they've added a lot more things that you can use a variable for. As values in triggers, checking single numbers, for example num pops is bigger than my variable, intel who from value is smaller than trigger num pops. As values in effects using a single number, add experience is my variable. As a multiplier parameter in triggered resource tables, for example in a building. So we've got these examples, resources, category planet buildings, cost, triggers, minerals is 100, multiplier is myvar /owner.trigger $point numpops. In MTTH AI chance modifiers, AI chance brackets open factor is 1, modifier is brackets open add factor. myvar /trigger numpops is variable set is myvar. Okay. Note that I do not understand a lot of this. I'm just presenting it for the modders. So, add modifier now has a time multiplier as well as a multiplier parameter. You can use them in there. For example, for death cults, this is used to apply a modifier for 10 years, x edict length mult. In ordered script lists, a feature yoinked from our newer games. I'll let the trigger docs entry explain. He says, and here we go. Ordered owned fleet, iterate through each fleet owned by the country. Executes the enclosed effects on one of the order specified. Position 0 order by trigger num pops would run the effects on the X with the most pops. And here you have it. Limit triggers position is integer starting with 0. Order by variable /trigger inverse yes no default no. If yes, then 0 is lowest rather than highest. Supported scopes country. If your variable is too exact a number, you can now use round variable to nearest to round its value to, for example, the nearest multiple of 10. A summary of these functionalities have been added to an information file in the events folder and attached to this post. So I'm linking this post in the description below, among other things, and you can find it there if you want to access that file. Also, I could well imagine further expanding on these usages of variables, so it's quite possible there will be even more coming along these lines in the future. The changes have already proven extremely useful to us. For example, improving death cult rewards got about 1,000 lines of script and still ended up with a new version taking more factors into account to determine the adequate reward for you. Fixing golden cash rule cash payouts. The previous solution was to fudge the numbers, give you an amount with a rather tenuous connection to the actual pay-in. It's no longer necessary. Improving Federation Science Leadership Challenge, adding the actual number of texts and repeatable texts you have researched as a factor, and more. Then there's Sprite Sheet Changes. There's a few more things I'd like to highlight. Certain older elements of the game and used sprite sheets for their icons. A system where a list of icons would all be in a row or on one image file, and we'd specify what we'd want to use. Say the 5th icon on the list. There were a few issues with these in-house. For example, colony automation button currently accidentally being a robotic cow springs to mind, and modders have pointed out that they are pretty bad overwriting bottleneck. Since only one mod can overwrite the sprite sheet at a time, and therefore only one can add extra types of that object that add new graphics at a time. Yeah, these files are terrible to work with, I can understand that. So, they've changed that. They've worked out a way to change index references to icons in sprite sheets into normal key references, which meant that we could convert these elements of the game to use the normal system with no need for new icons to be inside a sprite sheet. This got rolled out to the likes of army types, colony automation types, bombardment stances, and with great difficulty ship sizes too. An example, sprite type, brackets open, name GFX ship size military 1, sprite sheet type is GFX ship sizes, default frame is 2. The case of ship sizes was a bit tricky, since icon frame index number then specified which icon it would use on multiple sprite sheets. In the end, they left the system in place for star bases, since very few tend to add a new type of starbase, and made the line icon is ship size military 1 tell the game to refer to several sprite keys. GFX text ship size military 1, GFX ship size military 1, GFX ship size military 1 top, GFX ship size military 1 top damaged. This will need some updating for mods which change the affected objects, since that old format no longer works, but in the long term it will hopefully solve a lot of the compatibility headaches. Yeah. Using the same system everywhere, if it works better, is probably a good idea. So, then there's something else, which also affects the normal player. It's randomness. Randomness is a pretty cool thing, but it's kind of tricky to program randomness. You need usually some kind of fractal formula for that, with imaginary numbers. And some have noticed that in certain cases the randomness of script functions such as random list is not very random. Specifically, events fired from on-game start had this issue, and various other on-actions, but that was one of that hurt the most. This was pretty unfortunate, since this effectively meant that certain things were meant to be different each game simply were not. Relatedly, we also revisited some of the more long-standing issues, like where if you used while loops or every X loops, each time the effect happened within that loop, the random result would be the same. So repeatable random results, not that good. As in 25x random list resulting in 25x the same result rather than 25x a random result. They fixed this quite exhaustively. Lack of randomness in on-actions like on-game start is fixed. If we in future make that mistake that caused this to happen again, the game will warn us, so hopefully it's banished for good. Nice. While loops and every X loops have improved randomness, for good measure we added a reroll random effect. Nice. So that's something, I mean, people might look on randomness as something optional. But I think true randomness, or close to true randomness, makes the game feel more alive, because we live in a world of, so far, true randomness. And what true randomness does is it gives you clusters, it gives you surprises, it gives you long open spots of nothingness. And what it doesn't do is it gives you, like, every X turns this happens. That is not something that randomness does. Randomness makes things chaotic, like balled up usually, and unpredictable. And that's the exact thing that we often like in games. Like, that's why people choose Randy Random, for example, in RimWorld, because they want to be surprised. And that's what randomness is for. Like, it feels more alive when you're surprised, and that's good. So other cool stuff. On another note, we can now add triggered pop modifiers to traits. So for instance, you can add a trait that gives bonus to one planet class and a penalty on another. The potential that this unlocks is quite considerable. For instance, it allowed us to stop using the somewhat unintuitive and eminently cheesable stopgap solution, giving Void Dwellers 2 traits and instead giving them one that applies differently, depending on what sort of planet they are on. What sort of planet? The Void Dwellers went on. Oh, okay. Let's just continue. As some have noticed, the clone army origin does several cool new things that we haven't really explored in the game before. A lot of what we added for it could have further cool uses in the future. For instance, you can now gender lock species. You can set an empire, like you could make a hive, right, with a queen, the hive queen, the classic beehive. You can set an empire limit on many instances of a building you can build and alter it during a game. Nice, a game rule. Should force decline species has been added, it will make a species for which it returns true decline on a planet, triggering an alert based on whatever tooltip is specified in the game rule. It's also hooked up to stop pops from migrating, being resettled, etc. to a place where they would immediately start declining. Nice. So, finally, there were a bunch of new effects, triggers and modifiers as usual. A couple to highlight are... Well, there's more files, so at the bottom of this. And if you're really interested in modding, you should probably download these files. As I've already said, I'll link you this thread in the description of the video. Set visited system reveals the system to you without having surveyed it. Set saved date lets you save a specific date coming in the future, so you can use it in logs similar to variables. This my save date. I want to have something like this in the game. I want to have something to use in the game, an alarm clock, because there's several things that you do not get notified for, and that you should not get notified for with a current notification system. But that you want to have a notification in some cases. At the start, it's very important to time everything you have. So to have something like a stopwatch there would be a wonderful mod. I don't know if that already exists, but that's something really cool. So technically, the last effect is actually adding a scope flag, so the standard flag effects and triggers have been ported over to all scopes. You can now use log commands in button effects, which apparently will be very useful for dynamic modded UIs. You can define descriptions for districts, buildings, jobs, and special projects through desk, text, trigger, epsilon. Now, they also take log commands. We deleted has non-swapped tradition and has tradition swap and consolidated them into has active tradition. Modders do a search replace. Okay. So that's for you modders, you should do a search replace. Consolidated both, if I understand that right, into has active tradition. Every scope that lacked script flags, for example country flag, now has them. Also variables work in all scopes now too. Note for updating mods. Count diplotize is now count relation. Count armies is count owned army or count planet army, depending on the case. every random mining station, research station have also been removed because they were nonsense. Oh my goodness. Use simply mining station, research station, orbital station, scope change instead. Also observation outpost, it no longer takes a limit, but you can say exists is observation outpost as a compensation. Adding all these new functionalities has been a boon for us in the custodian team. So this is the first real message from the custodian team. Solidifying the game. I think it looks good, especially I like the randomness because I understand it, but the other things might be great for modders too. I don't understand them really because I don't mod. One last thing, the old trigger docs log has now been deprecated, and instead we now have a more wieldy and more comprehensive script documentation folder, the contents of which are attached to this post. So that's a new folder. As some of you are probably aware, we did some early access for modders at the Nemesis update. We had about 10 mods update on release day, servicing around 1.6 million subscribers. Overall, we're very happy with the results. The community reaction. This continues to go well. They're looking to gradually expand this experiment to more of the modding community. For them, looking to add another 10-ish modders to the early access experiment. So 10 more modders, if I understand that right, to expanding that to 20 modders. If you're interested, you can fill out a modder early access request form. So you could get early access if you're a modder, particularly with a relatively popular mod, as I understand it. So go for it. As I'm repeating another time, I have linked that thing in the description and also on my blog. So thank you for watching and happy gaming to you. I hope that helped you, all the modders, and I hope this was still interesting for all you non-modders. For me it certainly was. I always enjoy like that deep gaze into the behind the scenes stuff. What happens behind the shiny things. Thank you for watching and happy gaming to you. Have a great time until next time and happy gaming. This is Immanuel Can signing out. See you soon and happy gaming. Happy gaming. Yeah. Did I already say happy gaming? I might have. I might just have.